one of the specific types of a low-energy honeypot is this concept of a canary. And a canary is kind of labeled such because back when they were doing mining, they would take a canary into the mine shaft. If the CO2 level got too high, the canary would die. And they'd be like, well, we better get out so we don't die. So that's kind of the concept here. You take a low-energy honeypot and you set up something conceptually that will be your canary. So if that gets tripped, whether it be like a packet across an interface or a hash document crossing your perimeter or something like that, you use that as something conceptually that when it dies, you have a very high confidence of the alert. And then I want to mention cloud. So we hear a lot about cloud and all the advantages it has for scalability and infrastructure, but it really does have a nice set of assets that you can use for this case. And what I thought was non-Linux approach is that all the risky software that someone might be scared to run on the internal network is actually running in the cloud. What you do is you take a tunnel and you take that malicious traffic and tunnel it up to the cloud for your monitoring. So your canary is actually in the cloud, and then you use strategic port redirects or traffic redirects from in your internal network, and you're able to respond to the canary's attack. So just real briefly, there's consensus, and one of the things I think that leads to low adoption rate for companies to use honeypots is that they kind of see it as a high-risk thing, either because of legalities or why would I want to put something vulnerable on my network? Maybe it's going to be leveraged as a toehold to attack my network. And one of the other reasons maybe is technical barriers. They don't know how to set it up. They don't have time to do that. And then fourth kind of is like the business, the priorities that are put on people. I'm sure this is a huge problem. Security doesn't need another toy. They don't need play. It's kind of pointless. So I'm going to try to address as many things as I can through the tool set that I want to integrate. So first I'm going to address is the legalities. And this was surprisingly a lot more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be. I'm not a lawyer, so I'll give that caveat. This is not professional legal advice. But I found some major things that bubble up. And they have no reasonable expectation of privacy. So you can collect information on the computer. This is the Wiretap Act is kind of in that same area of code, basically says that you can't collect, intercept phone data and things like that. But they do have a clause there that says the network operator may intercept communications if the user consents to such activities. And this is pretty simple to get around. And what you do is you basically, any port or service that you're emulating, you would insert a banner that says, by accessing this computer, you're consenting to monitoring. There's a bunch of creative ways that you can get consent. Say, like, hey, you click this link, you're consenting. Final one, I kind of left this last because it's the easiest one. You just strictly look at the definition of entrapment. It says a law enforcement officer or a government agent induced a person to commit a crime. That means a fraud or undue persuasion, and attempts to later bring criminal prosecution against that person. So if you're not a law enforcement agent and you're not a government agent, you are not going to be violating the law when it comes to entrapment. So I want to kind of transition now. So we kind of talk about legalities, and I want to talk about the mindset between someone who's defending a network and someone who's attacking it. And what I really believe is that people will commonly say things like, well, the red team guy, he only has to be right once. Then he wins the game. And the blue team, they have it so hard because they have to be right all the time, and they never fail or they lose. And what I'm saying here is that this is actually counterbalancing, right? So for a red team person to be successful, they have to chain together multiple successes, right? They have to find your network, they have to know when to attack and what they're going after, as they define their goals. They have to successfully bypass all your controls in succession, in the attack chain, kill chain. The blue team, in order to lose, has to fail continuously through each one of those steps. It's not one, it's not on or off, it's a continuum of either you're succeeding or you're failing. So inherently, it's not that way, where the red guy just has to be right one. Honestly, I feel like, given the way things are set up, the defenders actually have an advantage. And the advantage is that they can build the environment in which they're going to do battle. If you think about this in like a military context, think about what kind of abilities would you rather have. Would you like to build your own environment if someone's going to try to attack you, things like physically? I think yes. So if you can bend the parameters of the environment in favor so strongly, you can gain that advantage. That's kind of what I'm talking about here with leveraging the cloud and so how did I do this? Kind of like the last presenter, I don't know if you saw us talk, but I'm a big fan of open source tools, and I'm not a developer at heart, but I love to integrate things together. So I think more my business is integrating, not so much developing. So I started this first project. Helped me out immensely. So without that, my project would not have been done by the time that I had to give this talk. Basically, what they've done is they built a honeypot management framework. And what it does is it fires up this really nice web interface. You can deploy a script. It shows you a script. There's one line of a wget of that script. You run the bash script on your honeypot platform, and it's up and going. The honeypot's running, and the data is flowing back to the server. And I think probably a lot of you are familiar with Security Engine. I would love to break out all the open source stuff that's in that distribution, but I didn't have the space. There's a ton of awesome tools within that distribution for network security monitoring, similar to what the last speaker was talking about for SIM, full packet capture, packet reconstruction. So if you're looking for like a PDF or an executable or anything like that, it's all within that box right there. Security Engine. Highly recommend using that as much as you can. Then I kind of just named all the different honeypots. If you do a search for a honeypot, there are just a plethora of different types that you can use. And kind of what I'm advocating here is bashing the honeypot you use to the business stream. So if you have industry control systems or point of sale systems, or if you're just an old Windows shop, or whatever your environment looks like, use the honeypot that kind of is indicative of your vertical that you're in. So the one I actually used for the demo is called Cayman, and it basically just emulates, I picked 4 services to emulate, and I use that. So after you have the honeypots kind of selected, I suggested some cloud servers. So virtual private server, I use Azure and AWS, but you can certainly find, there's tons of providers within this, Google or DigitalOcean. If you find one, you have money to spend, you get a couple provider and some non-extradition company like Switzerland, or a country like Switzerland or something, you can more comfortably that way. And then what you need to do is kind of figure out how you're going to get those packets to divert from your internal network when the adversary is hitting this source back up into the cloud. So I'll detail a couple of those. One thing I added later was this collective intelligence framework, and it kind of really closes the loop for what you're doing here and how you can leverage that back to your tools as far as signature-based detection. And I'll kind of teach that one here. So here's how you set up NHNs. This is the modern honey network. It's super simple. Run these commands. If you're on Ubuntu 12.04, you're up and going right after that. So take one of your file boxes and run this, and you are set. If any of you have MSDN, you're entitled to $150 a month of Azure service. That's what I use, and I was completely covered there. So it's a good way to do it, so you don't have to get an expensive quarter or anything like that. Security Engine. The installation of Security Engine, even given how complex it is very simple. It's a next finish type operation, but again, it's on Ubuntu 12.04. And what I would suggest is you have this on one box, and then you have Security Engine on another box. Separate networks. So don't build a certain cloud network network. Then you basically go to NHN, and it's kind of that process I detailed a little bit. You pick which honeypot you want to deploy, and what platform it's going to, and you click it, and it gives you a script to run, you wget it onto the box, your Security Engine box, and set sets it up, and then it builds the data feed back to your central box. So I kind of just detailed a couple bit. So then, once you have it all set up, you start to build your tunnels. And we'll talk a little bit about placement later, but what you want to do is have these strategic places that make sense in your network where you can track malicious activity that's going to give you really actionable data to respond quickly. So here's a couple examples of tunnels. S-tunnel is the best option. It's not necessarily the easiest to set up, but basically when you set up S-tunnel, it's a kind of like a point-to-point encrypted connection that will take anything on one port and forward it across the encrypted tunnel, and then decrypt it on the other end and drop it to another port. So there's a lot of configurability there, and it's encrypted, so that's kind of handy. It's SSL. There's just a sample config here, and a good article on what to do. Kind of mark there. There's a couple other options. I'm sure there's just dozens of different ways you can tunnel. As an attacker, you might build it over channels. Might not be the best way, but there's just a bunch of different ways. SSH, you can do it that way. I don't recommend that. Instead, on that box, you'll have to have credential material for how to build a tunnel. Squid, I didn't recommend that. It might be a great way. I'm just not super familiar with it. The only thing I'm familiar with doing is using the HTTP connect method to tunnel through there. But I had a buddy who's going to OCP, and he was talking about this yesterday. And I looked at this, and it's basically exactly what you want. It's a daemon, and I'm not sure if it's cross-platform, but we're on the Linux-based platform for sure. And what it does is you just put the address pairs that you want to forward to. So you say bind on this port on this address, go to this port on this, or this address on this port. So that's one I ended up using for the demo. It's just super simple to set up, and I'll show you guys that later. Placement. So I basically think this is probably the most important slide. Is you don't get the placement right of where you're going to redirect these, they're going to be kind of worthless to you. And there's kind of a process that goes behind this. So if you know what you want to protect, like let's say your company makes widgets, and your IP is how this widget is made, that'll be what you want to protect. So start from there and move back. And look at what that kill chain would look like. So how would an attacker get past your perimeter, unauthenticated, all the way to your crown jewels? And then what you would do is at any point where they have to pivot or move laterally, you put these small port redirection clients in an enticing way. Like let's say there was a NetBIOS share or something like that. They need to authenticate. You can put your honeypot there, hopefully emulating SMB, and then you have data that would tell you when someone's trying to pivot that way. If you segmented the network properly, these might be a little rough. Another way you can really get good intelligence on placement is to analyze your past incidents. So let's say you had a really big incident 2 years ago, and you actually documented it, maybe in a file at a specific place. Pull that out and look at how the adversary got from unauthenticated internal entity to their goal. So if they accomplished their goal, you can look at how they got all the way through that. Think about that when you place it. All right, so now what are you going to do? So you have your cloud honeypots are set up, you have all this stuff set up. It's time to start utilizing it. So one way that you can do that is deception. And I think deception is probably one of the most powerful tools that defenders aren't using enough. And just from an attacker perspective, I'm just thinking about a couple things that I can outline. This is an exhaustive list, and there's room for creativity here. Just thinking about tools that someone might have used to compromise your network. I can guarantee that most attackers are going to use Nmap. I trust Nmap like a close friend when I'm attacking the network. And if it was lying to me, I'd probably trust even what it's saying. So if you can do things that are going to manipulate packets in a way where the adversary is going to get to that, from the keynote, the great term used was that strategic paralysis. So you want to get to a point where your attacker is seeing things that don't make sense and they don't know what to do next. And eventually they get frustrated and leave. Or you've detected them repeated the way they got in and kicked them out. So you can report open for the service behind them. You can do all kinds of stuff. And really what I want to say here is like this is your opportunity to be really creative in how you're building your battlefield. right? So you can make things that just bring as much pain to someone who's trying to attack you as possible. And I don't know, as a defender, that sounds really fun to me. So I was kind of thinking is, what you want to do is deceive as much as possible. Attribution, I kind of hesitated to talk about this too much because it's kind of something that people debate quite frequently, but I thought I'd put just one slide in that can kind of illuminate the importance of attribution. Not so much to get someone arrested, because you're probably not going to get someone rushing car arrested, but more to learn about who's attacking you. But I did note that for an insider threat, attribution would be really important, because you're going to want to be able to either take legal action or just move to termination or something like that. Because the insider threat, this is going to be critical. You're going to need a lot of data. It's going to be really airtight. So I just thought that note there. One of the other things you can learn, kind of in the overview, the agenda, I said adversary awareness. That's more what this is, not so much attribution. But you want to know, is a machine attacking you, or is there someone on the keyboard attacking you? So that's going to change how you deal with it. And if you know that, hey, we don't see target attacks that often, but we see automated all the time, an automated system is easy to deceive. It's going to be the same thing, it's programmatic. It doesn't have intelligence in it. A target attack, much more difficult, right? So you can adjust the security program appropriately, knowing who's attacking you. And maybe you can get someone arrested. Maybe that's the goal first. So once you understand the threat actors, you can really use that to tune your security program to maximize the effectiveness of your defense. So basically what this is all going to do, and at the end, you'll have a good framework that's going to feed data into your basically into your back pocket of how you're going to be understanding who's attacking you and what to do about it. You can use it to bring context to your incidents. Maybe you're going to have an incident that didn't touch these, and maybe you'll know where to place them better. You can use continuous improvement with this data. You can also, we're kind of talking about the match campaigns this morning. You can really use this data to feed it. So if you have something that can do an automated response, maybe a firewall that you could send IP feeds to, that collective intelligence framework can feed apples to like a Cisco firewall. So if you have this is such trusted material that you know that when something happens from an IP within your network, you can auto-block it. If you want to have a self-defending network, you can do that. All right, so I'm going to detail how I set up the test case, some of the data that I got, some of the things I've seen. Basically, what I did is I had set up kind of what previously noted, security onion box and Amazon cloud server. And this box is actually running Kali Linux. But it doesn't really matter what that's doing. That's just the port redirect piece of it. But in your real network, this would be internal, and the ports would be lifelike, so the attacker would understand what they're going after. And then this here is the HoneyNet, or the modern HoneyNet management server. This is where your collective intelligence framework would run, as well as where all the honeypot feeds would go to from the actual honeypots on the security inbox. So this first step here, you can look up here, probably hard to see. But this is what you're doing to redirect ports. I just picked 4 ports that I thought would get a lot of activity, and given mine as a public, your internal one you're hoping you do not get activity on. But on the public internet, when you put these ports out there, you get a lot of attention. So this is FTP, Telnet, SMTP, and then RDP. So you set this config to that RINetD, and then you start to service up, and it'll be listening on those ports. When you send a packet to that port, it will redirect to your honeypot. This is the actual honeypot. So if you look at what ports are listing on honeypot, it has like every possible service you can imagine. And the emulation of the service kind of varies in how much attention the honeypot creator had given to that protocol or service. So for FTP, you actually need a Berner. You can run some commands, you can kind of interact. If you try to upload a file, the file will be captured. Telnet says it's like a Solaris box. A couple other things. RDP, you can't actually load a screen. I think there are other honeypots that will emulate RDP better, but I just want to kind of stick with one for simplicity's sake. And so, given that platform you have a security onion and your ability to collect data, you can then do analysis really specific to what you're looking for. You can alert from this platform, or you can do kind of trending. You're going to have to probably tune out. If you do like internal vulnerability scanning, these ports will get hit no matter what. So how to tune that out? But that's not very difficult to do. You should know what your vulnerability scanners are anyway. But this is basically, I think, about 12 hours of activity. You can see I have a good list of public IPs that are attacking the ports that I have out there. And so this data, you can do all kinds of things with it. If you want, let's say you just want to auto-shun SSH, because people scan for SSH all day long. It's just noise. So if you wanted to do that, you could just feed the SSH IPs into your firewall. This is actually the MHN box. Now, to note, so like when you actually have a packet arrive and the MSN platform security onion, you'll be able to get the real public IP of the attacker. But when you're on the actual MHN box, it wasn't designed to kind of be used the way I was using it. So you only see what the IP was of the client you're redirecting. So you won't know exactly which public IPs are here, but there's some cool features in there, just kind of dashboard to look at it. It's a lot more pretty. You get things like a map. You can see these red dots. It was real time. You can see things blinking. If I had more time, I'd probably overlay an actual network of my own with segments, and then you can see if any of these are monitoring or stop or something. You want to put a map on it. So it could be whatever. So that is enough. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
What's your thoughts on instead of deploying sensors everywhere, maybe just doing dark nets and routing all your unallocated networks to a couple of different honeypots?
Sure, you could do that. So it's not like a public IP space can be routed back to the cloud.
Well, no internal space. If you're trying to get the hack on a second plan or something like that. I'm just trying to weigh the pros and cons of having the sensors. You've got a lot of remote locations versus just taking all the network chunks and then just routing them back to your jump blocks and then going into the level.
Sure. Either way, I know that there's like a layer 3 solution to what I was doing instead of port redirection, and I just wasn't comfortable enough with like, hey, push this Cisco config. But I bet it could be done, and that would probably be a lot more efficient than actually putting software to run on whatever endpoint.
I just have a comment about the darknet. I was running one. I had 6 Class Cs feeding into one. It was just right to see now. And what I caught in there most of the time was just malware that was scanning everything. I wasn't catching a lot of other stuff.
Right. And so I know that honeypots generally are used by academics, right? So they throw it on the internet, they maybe catch some novel malware, reverse engineer it, and then like maybe we'll find a 0-day that way, like Fireman does that all the time. The thing I thought was neat is you put the honeypot internally in your network, and if something pops on that, you'll know like, okay, my perimeter's been breached. Like this is time to like wake people up and take action. So I think that helps as far as